The House of Commons Science and Technology Select Committee has been looking at the whole issue of science practicals, the proposition that's come from Ofqual to change the way in which A-level practicals are measured. The science community has real concerns about Ofqual's proposition, their decision to remove practical skills from the main grade of science A-levels. The previous minister told us that there was no alternative on the table. We weren't convinced by the minister's argument, so what we did was bring together in the House of Commons a leading group of experts in science teaching. And we sat down and looked at a number of propositions that could be realistic alternatives.
There's another dimension to doing practical work, which I think the current Ofqual proposal actually doesn't really address. And that's the whole business of developing a sort of inquiring, investigative approach to practical work. So it's not just doing the techniques, it's actually asking questions, designing practical work, evaluating your conclusions, all of those sorts of things which are not addressed by the, have you used a microscope?
So we do acknowledge that change must happen, but we're concerned at the pace of the reform, that so much of the conversation for a long time with DfE and Ofqual was about the content, and that the discussion about the assessment has been rushed.
I'm also bothered about whether there's been sufficient thought of employers as opposed to universities, because quite often the employers are more interested in taking on A-level people, the people at that level, in their practical skills, and the fact that they can integrate those practical skills with an understanding of theory.
We don't want to recommend a firm alternative approach. We want to recommend exploration of other approaches, because the whole point is Ofqual doesn't have evidence of the impact of its approach, and neither do we have full evidence on what would happen with the different approaches.
Practical work is such an integral part of it. It's as integral in science as it is in art, for example. This is what we've got to get clear. If it's just a pass-fail, it doesn't tell you much at all, really.
We all want to encourage more practical science in schools, of course we do. But schools have to have the capacity to deliver high-quality practical work.
But there is a range of approaches that can be taken to this, far from being the case that there is no alternative. So under this model, there would be a circus of activities in a laboratory. Students would move from station to station carrying out a short activity. It would be invigilated by a teacher from another school.
I urge ministers to listen to those people who say that this decision by Ofqual won't deal with the problems that Ofqual identified with science teaching, will not ensure students leave school with the skills wanted by universities, will not achieve the government's aims to broaden the take-up of science, and most crucially, will not encourage schools to be aspirational about practical science. Minister, when you appeared before us, you were convincing on the need to exhort and encourage. You also believed that every school should have better facilities, and yet Ofqual appeared to be catering for the least equipped schools.
The well-resourced schools will cope and adapt relatively quickly.
Yes.
That isn't representative of all schools.
That we are talking about much broader issues here around how we get to a place where we have good quality practical science. Sure, Ofqual and awarding bodies have a very important role in providing that kind of supportive qualifications framework. But we're talking here about investment in school buildings, we're talking about the way in which schools are staffed and structured, and those are big political questions that frankly, the committee has a role in exploring and testing, and it would be good to see that taken forward. But I think that's a very clear message, that it's not just about how we structure an A-level that will lead to these solutions. There are many broader issues that have to be addressed.
You thought that practical science should be inspirational, and I'm speaking to you today from the Science Museum, one of the most inspirational science facilities in the country. I hope that when you look at the situation and speak to the people that we have, you will see that there are positive alternatives for you to consider. Don't listen to the counsels of despair. Look at the positive examples in places like the Science Museum and urge schools to aspire to do better practical science.